All right, so we're going to talk about turkeys today. It's our introduction to turkey hunting seminar. My name's Logan Klonecke. I'm the Hunter Education Coordinator here in the Western region. I'm joined by Zach Campbell, the Conservation Education Supervisor, and John Ewank. He's our biologist of big game here in the Western region. I did have a chance to speak with our upland game biologist, Sean Espinoza. He wasn't able to join us today, but he did give me some good notes. I got them written down, so I won't leave any of that good stuff out. So let's get rolling with our turkey hunting seminar. We'll be going over the history of turkeys, some life history, biology, some Nevada statistics, and then general hunting seasons and tips and tactics to hunting turkeys wherever you're at. Across the world there's only two types of turkeys. The ocellated turkey is found in Central America. You can hunt them down in Mexico. They look very different from our 5 American turkeys that we have. But those guys are only in Central America, whereas our American turkeys are here in the US. The first species is our eastern turkey. It's the largest subspecies of the turkeys. It's found on the eastern United States, and they're the most common ones that you see attacking mailmen on the East Coast. The Osceola, it's the smallest of the turkey species, found more towards Florida in the southeastern United States. They're a little bit different looking. All the subspecies are pretty similar looking, but these are the most different looking of the 5 subspecies regarding their feather coloration. The Goulds, they're found in Arizona and New Mexico, typically in the southeastern United States or southwestern United States. They have more white coloration to them, and they average around 17 pounds. The Merriams, they're found in the western United States. They also average around 15 to 20 pounds. And then the Rio Grandes, they're about medium-sized turkey, also around 17 to 20 pounds, also found in the western United States. So you guys know what kind of turkeys we have in Nevada? We got 2 types. Rios are one of them, and anybody want to take a crack at the other? Merriams. Should be 3 clicks for this one. One more. All right, so Merriams, they were first released in 1960. There's 24 total birds released into the Spring Mountains. And then in 1963, there was a second release in Little Valley of Washoe County. The Washoe County birds persisted for about 20 years, and a big snowstorm took most of them out, so we don't have turkey in Washoe County anymore. Then there's 273 total Merriams released into Nevada through 2017. And then for the Rios, 2 clicks. First released in 1987 at Mason Valley. That was a total of 16 birds released. Those birds were from Livermore, California. And then total there has been 1,931 Rio Grandes released in Nevada. 57 total releases. And we actually traded bighorn sheep with Texas for a couple transplants of turkeys. So a little life history on them. Nationwide populations reached a low in the early 30s, and more emphasis was focused on the importance of turkeys and turkey conservation in the late 30s. Then the 50s is when transplants started with the invention of the net cannon. And then females will average about 8 to 11 pounds, males 17 to 21 pounds. They can survive up to 15 years in the wild, with a 54 to 62% annual survival for hens and gobblers. Then poults, which are the hatchlings of the year, 53 to 76 die within the first 4 weeks of life. And then the age classes for turkeys are separated from poults, juveniles, yearlings, and adults. Poults are 0 to 28 days. Juvies, 29 to 9 months. Yearlings, 10 to 21 months. And then anything over 21 months is considered an adult. And turkeys have density-dependent population growth, which means At lower population sizes, they'll reach higher body mass just due to resource availability and predation and other ecological and biological factors. So the demise of the turkeys was clear cutting for logging purposes and converting land to agricultural purposes from the 1700s to the 1800s. They're also a main food source for early settlers, unrestricted harvest on them, and turkeys were in very high numbers across the East Coast. So the early settlers really took use of them. As you can see, all the turkeys hung up behind them there. And by the 1900s, 9 states have lost their entire turkey populations. Restoration started late 30s. More emphasis was put on land stewardship, so small farms would revert back to more shrubland and planting native grasses and trees for the turkeys to do better. And then excise taxes and license sales were used to support those restorations, such as the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is still around today. It's an 11% excise tax on outdoor-related goods. And that money goes straight into conservation. Then in the 50s, trap and transplant programs were started across the U.S. and they're still utilized today to move turkeys from one state to another. Translocations, this one, we have a cool little video from a translocation that was done about 2 years ago, I believe. It was birds from Paradise Valley moved to the Walker River, and this video will go through a little bit of process of what goes into a trap and transplant program. So transitioning from history of turkeys and transplants, we'll break down a turkey's year. They don't do a whole lot. They're not insanely active. They don't go migrating or anything. In the fall, their flocks will break up into smaller groups. They'll be spending most of their time foraging, scratching, looking around for insects and food underneath the snow and leaf litter. Then as it starts to warm back up, the toms will establish dominance between each other to fight for territories and to get the best spots to increase their chances of breeding with the best hens. The spring and summer, that's when they're going to be most active, responding to calls, being out and about. And they'll be breeding, nesting, and the poults will be hatching. And then towards the end of the summer, the gobblers will start to leave the hens, and everything will start to break back up into smaller groups, and that process will keep repeating. Three typical behaviors of the turkeys are breeding. In that top picture, it's two toms fighting to establish dominance and breeding rights for that territory, or at that moment with whatever hens are in the area. Roosting, in that bottom picture, turkeys will spend most of their day in the roost, or most of the evenings in the roost. That's where they'll sleep. They're safe from predators there. And they'll typically use the same roost night after night unless there's constant pressure pushing them out of that roost. And they'll typically be up in cottonwoods, or sometimes they've been up in willows. Then feeding, that's what they spend their entire day doing, in open fields, scratching around, looking for bugs and insects. And then in Nevada, they particularly like rose hips, juniper berries, and forbs. But they eat a large variety of insects, and they've been seen eating acorns, and they don't just stick to one type of food. Senses, they rely very highly on their eyes. They have very enlarged optic regions in their brain. They have monocular vision, so their eyes are on the sides of their heads, whereas we have binocular vision where our eyes are both facing forward. So they can't perceive distance all too well, but that's why you see a lot of birds flicking their heads back and forth. It's how they make up for the lack of being able to perceive distance, just by quick little changes in direction. Their hearing is also very good. They can discern low frequency sounds and hear from far off distances very easily. Their smell, they have very poorly developed olfactory regions in their brain, so they don't have a great sense of smell. And then taste, I don't know how somebody figured this out, that they don't have a good sense of taste, but they sure do taste good to us. Mobility, they run more than they fly, but they can fly very well and very fast for short periods of time. They've been estimated to run up to 12 miles per hour, and they could leap straight into flight without a running start. Then they've been recorded up to 55 miles per hour, and they have elliptical shaped wings, which are designed for short and fast flights to evade predators. And they could fly 8 to 10 days. All right, so moving to Nevada specific stuff right here. So there's 4 different types of hunts that we offer in Nevada. We have our fall hunt. Those are in Paradise Valley of Humboldt County. They're not applied for. You have to go through our licensing office to get a landowner sheet to see who is offering hunts on their property for that fall season. Then we offer a junior hunt with 6 areas to apply for. The limited entry has 9 areas and 3 with multiple seasons, which are broken up into early and late spring season. That's Mason Valley, Moapa, and Unit 115. And then an open quota in the spring, which is again a private lands tag. We don't put quotas on the private lands. The landowners do a very good job of keeping track of how many turkeys can be taken off of their land. So you have to get the contact list from us, and then contact the landowner, and then they'll either say yes or no, or if they charge a trespassing fee. And then Walker River, like John said, that's the Rafter 7 release. Sean is hoping that we will have a spring of 24 hunt there. So that'll be a brand new hunt. And then there's been severe flooding in Mason Valley and Battle Mountain, Argentina WMAs. Sean recommended possibly having a canoe for those, which would make for a really cool story, hunting a turkey with a canoe in Nevada. So those are, for this year, like you guys said, most of you don't have tags for those areas. It's just a wet year for us.
Do you think that would have a negative impact on the numbers?
It could. It definitely affect the hatchling survival and the nesting rates and how much breeding does go on, depending on how spread out the turkeys are, if they do get spread out. Yeah.
What are the dates for the application for tags?
Do you know off the top? I think early April.
I want to say it was like late January and February.
Yeah, they have it's before like big game applications and whatnot, but the results are out already for turkeys. I'm pretty sure that's a January to late February application period. All right, then 115 of that last slide, a significant portion of birds are on Great Basin National Park lands, and you can't hunt birds on the national park. All right, then this is our harvest success by unit. This is how we determine our quotas for the turkeys. If harvest success is under 60% for 3 consecutive years, our quota will decrease for that unit. If it's between 30 and 60%, that is considered a stable quota for that population. Then if it's over 60% for 3 years, that unit may get an increase in quota. And you can see a lot of our units have very high success rates. All of them are over 50 and a few are getting close to 100%. So we may have increased chances of turkey hunting here in Nevada shortly. Then beard length, it's how we determine our age classes of turkeys for the males, and it's also considered a trophy factor for turkey hunters. And you can see a lot of our beards are well over 6 inches, so we have a lot of very stud turkeys here. And the way the age classes are broken up by beard length, if it's under 3 inches, it's considered a Jake. Over 3 inches is considered a Tom. Anything 7 inches or greater is a very mature bird. So we have a lot of great quality birds here in Nevada. And then our population estimates, with its Rios and Merriams combined, we have between 1,700 and 2,500 turkeys. But with transplants, hopefully we'll keep getting those numbers up. Our spring quotas for this year, 19 total junior tags, 76 resident tags, and 5 non-resident tags. Draw odds for turkey in Nevada are about 5%. So it's not a high success or a high probability draw, but keep getting those bonus points up and you'll probably draw them in no time. I believe Sean said we only get about 2,000 total applications for turkeys. And then our open hunts, those are a great option if you want to get out and contact landowners. It's a different style of hunting, but you're still getting out with turkeys. You just got to connect with the landowners. All right, so we'll move into spring hunting season and start getting into actual hunting of turkeys. So spring, it's when the turkeys are most active. They're out mating. They're going to be just out and about more. You're going to be imitating hen calls to attract gobblers. You're going to use shot gobbles to locate turkeys. You don't want to make turkey calls to like get a general idea of where the turkeys are. Shot gobbling could be almost any noise that's not a turkey. They've been seen gobbling from car horns, sirens, predator calls, almost anything. Most commonly, people will bring owl hooters with them just to get a turkey to gobble. So you could estimate where turkeys are and start looking for them. The hooters are really easy. and then if there's turkeys around, they'll hopefully gobble, and you have a general idea of where to go look for them. But it's not just one type of sound that they'll start gobbling to. It's any type of sound, really. And then for decoys, in the spring, that's when options are most open. Typically, people will run one jake, one hen, or two hens, one jake. And then in the spring, you want them in a receptive position, like this hen decoy, where they're up and alert, or laying down. Then fall season, they're more so thinking with their stomachs, looking for food. You're gonna have to pattern them in the fall because they'll keep using that same resource until it's worn out. So if you find a good feed, you're gonna wanna look on that feed to see if they keep consistently using that. And then in the fall, you'll wanna use 2 feeding hen decoys. You don't wanna run a tom or a jake decoy with them just because they're not as apt to go and fight for that territory. They're just going to come in pretty aggressively to get that food and not fight with another male turkey. So the most important part of turkey hunting is being able to identify turkeys. You got to be able to tell the difference between a jake and a tom or a hen. That's the first thing you're going to have to learn how to do turkey hunting. And we'll get into that. Common or male physical characteristics to go off of when trying to judge a turkey from a bit of a distance are their wattles, carnicles, snood, dewlap, and beard. Their wattles are the little like fleshy piece of skin underneath their chin. The carnicles are the red dots on the back of their heads. The snood is that little flap on their beak that just helps with temperature regulation. And then the dewlap, it's the little fleshy part on the base of their neck. And then just the sheer size of the male turkeys is significantly larger than hens. They average about 40 inches in height and 17 to 21 pounds. And then we'll go over female physical characteristics next. Hens are just much smaller. They don't have the ornamentation that the males do. They're a lot more dull and ugly looking. The beard, you don't want to make your judgment off of the beard because hens can be bearded. They won't have a big giant beard hanging off of them like the big toms will, but they can be sometimes confused with jakes. And we can't shoot hens here in Nevada unless you have the fall season. And they're just much smaller, 30 inches in height and 7 to 8 pounds. So you'll be able to, if there's one standing next to the other, you're going to be able to tell them apart. And then here's a close-up of the heads between a hen and a tom. Significant coloration difference between them. And that's just looking at turkeys, getting out scouting, he'll start to pick up on it more. Same as judging deer's antlers on a deer from a distance. You'll be able to learn how to do it with turkeys. So we know how to tell a tom from a hen now. Where do we find turkeys at? Roost at night. They'll often be in the same spot. Very vocal in the early mornings. They'll quiet down towards the afternoons and pick up a little bit in the evenings. They prefer fields, natural clearings, and near road edges. Like I said, don't use a turkey call. You want a shot call to find where they're at, where they're hanging out at in your particular area of interest or where you're hunting. And while you're scouting, you want to be shot calling too to look for better areas to find turkeys and where they're at. So particular habitats in Nevada that you want to look for: riparian, agricultural, woodland, and suburban areas. Riparian areas next to open fields where there's cottonwoods growing, willows. You're more than likely going to find turkeys in those open corridors next to them. Agricultural land near farms. If there's some shrublands next to the farms that you can hunt on, they're more than likely going to be roosting over there than coming down to eat off the agricultural lands. And then on the edges of suburban lands, they'll go into people's yards and eat their grass and seeds that they got growing. But typically the suburban birds stay in suburban areas. So we'll break down each part of scouting and things to look for now. Like the roosts. If you could find a turkey roost and get there the morning before, you're probably going to have a successful hunt. This is just an image depicting a roost. The turkey coming out of it or coming into it. They'll just hang out way up top in the cottonwoods where they're safe for the evening, away from predators. They'll typically use the same ones as long as there's not predators bumping them off of them continuously. Scat is another great sign to look for when you're out scouting. Toms will have straight scat, whereas hens will be curled due to their cloacas. So you could tell the difference between sexes from their scat. Scratches, these will be a good sign to look for in the fall seasons, even spring too, they'll do it a little bit. It's just more bare areas in the ground where they've been spending time digging for insects and seeds in the ground. Tracks, you could also tell sexes between tracks. Toms are much larger, hens are pretty small, and then toms will also usually have dew claw implants or imprints into the dirt. If you could get out and scout after a good rainy day and cut some tracks, you might find some turkeys. There's a reason turkey hunting is called the poor man's elk hunt. It's very similar. You're going to be using e-scouting to find likely habitat to go scout in. You're going to walk the property or unit, put in some miles. Not as much as a big game hunt, of course, but you're have to do some looking, and then glassing. If you find a good spot to glass where you could see a large portion of an open field, spend some time glassing, bring your spot and scope or your binoculars, and spend the day looking for turkeys. So let's say we found turkeys from scouting. We know how to tell them apart. Are we ready to go hunting? Not quite yet. There's still lots of prep and gear to look into for a turkey hunt to have a successful hunt. We'll start off talking about your gun. You don't want to use anything too shiny. They'll be able to pick it out very easily. You want a tight choke, full or extra full. There are specialized turkey chokes that you could look into. You just got to make sure they're compatible with your gun. A good sight, the sight that comes with your shotgun will be more than enough to have a good hunt, but if you want to get fancy, you could look into purchasing a red dot perhaps. But normal sights will be just fine. 2012 or a 10 gauge, pretty much anything you got will work. You do want to make sure it's capable of holding a 3-inch or 3.5-inch Magnum or a specialized turkey load. They just perform different, have a little more power to them, and spread out better for turkey hunting. And then patterning your gun is also very important. These particular turkey targets out at 30 yards, it's the actual size of a turkey. You really have to know how your gun's going to shoot and what your pattern will look like at 40, 30, and 20 yards. So you know how to aim, where to aim, and every choke and ammo is going to perform different. So you really need to know how your equipment is going to work and what it will look like in action. Camouflage turkey hunting is extremely important. You want to be able to match your surroundings. Avoid wearing red, white, blue, and black, just because those are the colors on a turkey, and they can very easily pick those colors out of the landscape if you are wearing them. Gloves and face masks are the most important parts to cover yourself up with, just because those parts are usually hard to cover. Your hands, you're going to be using your hands for calling, and your face obviously sticks out in contrast to everything else on the landscape. Also red, white, and blue, or red, white, blue, and black you want to avoid because another hunter may mistake you as a turkey. So make sure you're being safe out there. Even though you're being safe, somebody else may not. So you want to make sure you're keeping yourself safe. Calling, it's very important for turkey hunting. You're not going to have a successful turkey hunt if you don't have a half-decent calling. The key to getting good at calling is practice, practice, and more practice. I practice in my car so I'm not annoying anybody, and turkey calling is loud and sometimes obnoxious. Just make sure you're practicing. types of calls are slates, diaphragms, and box calls. Slates are easy to learn for a beginner. They do require 2 hands though. And the 3 main calls that you will be using turkey hunting are yelps, cuts, and purrs. And rhythm is extremely important. Even if you aren't a great sounding turkey, rhythm is what's going to convince them. For yelps, you're going to be doing small ovals on the slate. Cuts are short little strikes on the slate. And purring, it's just a long drawn out motion on the slate. And you can combine all 3 of those to convince a turkey that you are a turkey. Another type of call is a diaphragm call. They're a bit harder to learn, but they don't require any usage of hands. They sit in your mouth. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes. To start out, you'll want to use a double reed with no cuts in it, just because it's more forgiving for a beginner. Then box calls, they're great for getting turkeys to come in from a distance due to how loud they are. Decoys, there's tons of different options and sizes. I'm a waterfowler, I love decoys. But turkey hunting, you're not going to be running a large spread. Typically going to have 2 to 3 decoys, or sometimes even 1 depending on the season. Most commonly you'll see a hen paired with a jake, or 2 hens with a jake. You want a feeder style decoy in the fall, or a feeding or a receptive hen in the spring. Typically you want to avoid overly large tom or jake decoy, because it may scare off other turkeys from coming in, especially if it's not a overly aggressive or large turkey that wants to come into your decoys. So we'll start to go over some hunting strategy. The night before you go out turkey hunting, if you don't already know where they're roosting at, you're going to want to find where they're roosting, so you have a good general spot to set up the morning before your hunt. You want to get comfy, you don't want to move a whole lot. There are options with turkey hunting. You get a big fancy vest like this. It has a padded seat on it. So you're not sitting on the ground. It has a ton of pockets for all your different calls, and a spot to carry your bird out on it. Or if you want to keep it simple, you could just get a little elevated seat. These aren't necessities for turkey hunting. They're just a little luxury item to make it more comfortable to sit in the same spot for a long time. And you want to keep, when at all possible, keep your gun mounted. Especially if you see turkeys working in a distance, that's when you want to get your gun ready, and where a diaphragm comes in handy. So you're ready, holding your gun, not moving a whole lot. The slightest movement can blow a hunt. I've heard stories of somebody hunting out of a tree stand for turkeys, and they moved their foot a couple inches and it blew all the turkeys out. So just be ready at all times, because it could turn on in any second. Start sparingly with your calling. Don't sit down right away and start being the loudest hen in the whole area. Base your calling on how the turkeys are responding. Sometimes if you're ignoring the tom, they get angry and come in, because nobody likes to get ignored. So base your calling off of that. If they need a little encouragement, try doing some purrs and clucks, and base your calling off how far away they are. So if they get hung up, they're staying right outside of your range, they don't want to fully commit to your decoys, change your calls, change the tone. If you have a different style diaphragm, try changing your diaphragm call, or just give them time. Or you could just not be in the spot where they want to be at. If they want to be somewhere else, it's going to be hard to get them to come to you sometimes. And if you don't get any response, keep shot calling, see if there are turkeys around even. Try moving spots, or just be patient. Like, the key to any successful hunt is patience. So time to close the deal. You got a turkey at 20 yards. Make a positive ID on it. Once you pull that trigger, there's no going back. And then make sure you don't move. And before you get excited after you take a shot and you think you hit them, make sure you hit them. They could get up and keep running. You may need a second or a third shot. And then to aim, you'll aim right at the base of the neck where the feathers meet the coloration and ornamentation of their necks. Then I believe that's everything. If you guys have questions, we got plenty of time to answer questions. Yeah.
What did you say the percentage of applications to getting a
5% draw odds.
5% draw?
Yeah, we get about 2,000 applications and 5% draw odds. Any other questions?
Applications, do you select fall or spring, or is it just?
So it's only spring applications. The fall is only the landowner permits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Have there been any positive blood results for avian diseases?
Not that I know of. Do you know of any, John?
So, not within turkeys, we haven't detected avian influenza.
All right. Well, if that's everything, I'll be sticking around if you guys come up with any more questions. But thanks for coming. Hope you learned a thing or two.